Holy subterfuge. Matthew 5:33-37. Jesus said, "Again you have heard that it was said to those of old, You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil." Mom was exceedingly clear to my brother and me. Be back home by midnight. We both heartily agreed that our curfew was reasonable. We will. But when 11:45 p.m. rolled around, we were having way too much fun, so my brother devised a plan. It was Saturday night, and daylight savings time ended on Sunday. We would actually fall back an hour. Hooray! We figured out how to squeeze an extra hour into our curfew. When midnight rolled around, we could say it was really only 11 p.m. 1 a.m. magically reverted back to 12. When we arrived at home, nearly an hour past curfew, Mom was not impressed. She was exceedingly angry after worrying a whole hour. Her wrath was rightly kindled at our faithlessness and weasel-like way of trying to get around our promise to be back on time. My brother and I were unfaithful, and we misused a technicality to justify it. I don't know if my mom was more upset by our lack of caring about her feelings or the failure of our moral character. I wonder how God felt when his people, the Jews, turned a straightforward commandment about following through on their promises and misused it as a technicality to avoid keeping their word. The law was exceedingly clear. If you make a vow to the Lord, keep it. Follow through with what you've promised. If you invoke God's name in an oath, do not fail to uphold your word. Do whatever it takes to fulfill your promises. Apparently, some Jewish weasels found what they thought was a loophole. True, God commanded faithfulness to vows made in his name, but what if the promise was made on something less than God's name? They developed an elaborate system of binding and non-binding oaths. They swore a promise on the temple. If they swore a promise on the temple, for example, it was non-binding, but a vow based on the gold in the temple was binding. The closer to God's person, the more binding. The further away, the less. Get the full picture in view. They took a positive command about faithfulness and used it as an excuse to lie. What a horrible misunderstanding of God's law. Jesus condemned this attitude and practice. If you're going to use God's law to deceive, you are a filthy, satanic weasel of a liar. Just say yes or no, and don't drag the Lord into your subterfuge. This is the kind of thing that happens when people forget that their purpose is to glorify God. We go to his word looking for loopholes rather than seeking to understand him. His law becomes a means to act on our self-interest rather than on a way to make him look as good as he really is. What were God's commandments concerning oaths intended to convey? He is faithful. God fulfills all of his good promises. Anything less from us, God's people, smears his holy name.